Hello, and welcome to the latest in IR Magazine's video series, Wednesday Winners, where I interview past IR Magazine award winners around the world in a socially distanced manner. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Lannum, who's currently with Zimmer Biomet. So Cole, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Ben. Great to be here. Thanks for doing this.
Absolutely. No, I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to chat to you. And for our audience members that perhaps aren't familiar with Cole is an extremely decorated IR professional at the IR Magazine Awards going back many years. I think you were on a 5-year streak at one point of winning IR Magazine Awards. So really appreciate you making the time to chat today. So the topic of today's discussion, we're going to be talking about managing putting out guidance versus setting expectations as a public company. Many companies right now have suspended quarterly or annual guidance, which they did immediately after the COVID-19 outbreak. And in the quarter that many companies have just reported, they were thinking beforehand, well, how do we, if we're not restating guidance, how do we set expectations? How do we communicate that? So curious about your thoughts on the difference between guidance and expectations.
Yeah, and what a time we're all living in terms of some of the companies' decisions that have to be made around this. And I think it's fair to say that boards and senior management teams around the world are struggling because of such a level of uncertainty that we're all dealing with. You point out a distinction that I think is an important distinction that I think many companies don't really focus on, and that's the fact that guidance and expectations are two very separate, very different things. And sometimes when companies lose focus of that, they can give messaging that can come across as less useful than it otherwise could be. So what do I mean by that? So let's think about the environment that we're in. Yes, a lot of companies have suspended guidance, have pulled it, including Zimmer Biomet as well, mostly due to the fact that we're dealing with this environment that's so uncertain for so many different reasons that we all know about that I don't have to go into. I think though, where it's important to think about the dynamic is guidance is just a tool. And I think some companies focus on guidance as being this magic, ultimate thing that's so very important. When in actuality, it's the expectations that you're really trying to address. And guidance is a very important method of doing that, but it's only one method of doing that. And I think the point is that guidance, you can suspend it, you can add to it, you can change it, you can reiterate it. And a company has complete control over what it says on guidance. But expectations are always out there. 365 days a year, whether you've given guidance or not, your customers, the investors, they have to go out there and take the information that the companies have given them, and they have to make decisions on that, what they want to do with their portfolios, how to address it with their portfolio managers, with their own clients. And I think it's important to remind boards and companies that while there may be great reasons why you should be suspending guidance right now, and I assure you, I get that, and I think we all understand that's a good that may be necessary, because you don't want to mislead people by falsely putting a number out there just to make it seem like you know more about what's going on than you really do. There may be great reasons to suspend that guidance, but I think companies need to think to themselves that once you've made that decision, you still have a responsibility to help your clients, your customers, your investors understand to the best of your own knowledge what's going on. And so I would submit that a company that just suspends guidance and says, that's it, we're done, we don't have guidance out there, we're going to wipe our hands of things, and call us back in 90 days for the next quarterly call, and we'll give you an update then. I think they're missing the opportunity to help bridge that gap of uncertainty. That doesn't mean that the managements and the boards know everything that's going on, but newsflash, even in the best of times, boards and management teams don't know everything that's going on. The key is trying to intelligently help those investors understand the dynamics so that they can go out and make their own decisions. And I would hope that more companies remember that even if they've chosen to give up on guidance, they still should think about those things that they can do, the color that they can give, the commentary they can give, the potential sensitivity analysis that may be out there, to still help investors make the decisions that they need to make.
Yeah, well, that I was going to ask you that as a follow-on question. You know, how can you help to set expectations without formally restating guidance? You know, I don't think for many companies, I don't think you can begrudge them for not wanting to write a number in cement right now and saying this is what we're guiding to for the next quarter or for the next 6 months, whatever it may be. So what are some, I don't know if it's whether appropriate to say what are some softer ways, but what are some other ways in which you can set expectations for, to help particularly, your analysts right now, who I think have an extremely difficult job of trying to, put out a clear signal of what's happening in the sector they cover.
So it's going to vary from company to company, I don't even pretend to know always the best thing to do for the companies that I work for. Much less could I suggest that other companies necessarily do it the right or the wrong way. But there are always ways to do that. And it comes to internally for the management team internally, truly understanding what they know and they don't know. There's always more knowledge internally at a company than what is given to the outside world, right? That the management team always knows more than they give out. That's just the reality of the fact that the management is doing it 365 days a year. That is their job, whereas the outside world just sees a slice of what's going on, hopefully in a compliant and complete manner. But still, there's a lot of stuff that you just don't tell the outside world. So part of it is understanding, yes, we're in an environment where supply chains are messed up. Demand is far harder to predict than it is in normal times. You've got competitors going out of business. You have different states around the world putting limitations on business practices and manufacturing and production and transportation. So all those things create uncertainty. And so I think the first key is, you may not know as much as you usually do in terms of being able to predict and forecast things, but you certainly know more than simply saying, you know what, don't know what's going to happen. The next year is going to be a complete unknown. So part of that difference is asking yourself, okay, what do we know that's going to happen? Or what do we know with some high level of probability? And then it may mean giving probability. Hey, look, there's a chance that revenues could be down significantly over the next 6 months, and let me tell you why that may happen. If and again, it's going to vary by company, but if this dynamic takes place and this dynamic takes place, or if we don't see a rebound in these kinds of situations, that is one thing that can happen. The other thing that I would note is that almost always when a company is doing their earnings call, they already have information that has taken place internally since the end of the quarter or the semi-annual reporting period. So they have more information than just what they're reporting on. Now, there are pros and cons to talking about trends over the last couple of weeks or over the last 6 weeks, since a reporting period has ended. But in times like right now, I think that additional information can be very, very helpful, as long as it's appropriately caveated, as long as people understand, hey, look, that doesn't mean that the trend is going to continue, but since the end of the quarter where we announced XYZ, we've seen the following things that are happening. Those are data points that help investors put the puzzle together. It may not be the all in, it could change, but I think those are other ways to do it. The other thing I'd say is, I do push back on anyone who says, well, we have to give some kind of formal guidance. Otherwise, people, we're going to, expectations are going to get out of place. There are lots of ways to do this. And I'll just, put a plug in. At Covidien, we never gave any earnings guidance. We never gave any quarterly guidance, and we didn't miss a number for 10 years. So 40 quarterly earnings reports, we didn't miss numbers. And by the way, that doesn't mean that we were, we weren't Amazon or Tesla where everything was going up every single year. We had our degree of cyclicality. My point is, when we saw things going on, even though we weren't certain 6 months or 6 quarters down the line that something was happening, getting in there early enough and helping people understand that this may be a longer process than what you're expecting, even though that may not make investors go run out and buy the stock tomorrow. That's another way to help tee these things up when the managements themselves start to see some of these things going on. Now, could you have done that on February 1st of this year in terms of forecasting COVID? Well, if you did, then you were the exception as to what's going on.
Sure.
But like it or not, we've now been through this, for more than 6 months. And I would submit to you that every single management team knows a hell of a lot more about what's going on and the dynamics today than they did in March and April. Does that mean that they're comfortable enough that they can start confidently giving precise quantitative guidance again? Well, many of them, no. But I guarantee you they're going to know more about it. And I think the answer to your question is finding those things that people on the outside, that's why it's so important, by the way, to monitor those expectations, to understand what your investors really are looking for, and finding those things that differ in terms of what investors think is going on, good or bad, and what you're seeing inside the business, having nothing to do with what your revenue growth rate next quarter or your EBITDA next quarter or your earnings next quarter are going to be.
Yeah. Well, that raises a really interesting question, and the final question I'll ask you in this video is, how can IR teams prepare their senior management to have these kind of discussions? As you say, senior management teams right now will know more than they're prepared to put out formally in guidance right now. And, there may be some IR professionals who are working with CEOs or CFOs who like to communicate with certainty. That's their brand. That's how they like to be known. And unfortunately, they're not going to be able to communicate very much with certainty as it stands, projecting forward. So how can IR professionals work with their management team to explain the importance of navigating this moment?
Yeah, again, you make a great point. CEOs tend to become CEOs because they know about their business. They understand how to manage their people. They understand how to make strategic decisions competitively, to make M&A decisions. That, I'm not that jaded. I actually think there is somewhat of a meritocracy when it comes to CEOs. And I think most of them get there because they tend to be pretty good at doing that. And so you put someone like that in an environment where you've just changed all the rules. And I don't know, maybe we've changed it for 6 months, maybe we've changed it for the next 600 years. Don't know. But clearly, I think everyone would agree that a lot of the rules have changed. And you're trying to figure out a brand new playbook because none of us has been through this before. And yeah, I could see a situation where CEOs and CFOs may want to hunker down because their reaction may be, well, why do I want to meet with investors? I don't know what's going on. I don't know what the answer is. Yep. And I think a couple things to say about that. First of all, most of the investors get that. They know that they're experiencing this in their own lives and with their other companies as well, and they can usually read through the BS anyway. If God forbid, and thank God I've been blessed with CEOs that I think are very straightforward talkers, but there are some that are out there. I won't name any, but there are some out there, who excel at, just coming up with what they think is a great answer to make people feel good no matter what. Those tend to be the companies whose stocks over longer periods of time don't perform as well, because eventually investors are not morons. They read through that. And I think being honest about what's going on, of course, consistent with, compliantly with the information that you've given in a public forum anyway, but letting people know that there's some of these things you just don't know the answer to. I think investors like to hear that. I think they'd rather get a great answer that's going to make their stock go up, but I think they'd rather hear honesty when it comes to something like this than someone just coming in and spouting a PR script that talks about how great things are going to be whenever things when they get through all this. By the way, things may be great when they get through all this, but they need to have evidentiary support behind that. So I think the thing that is the worst to do in times like this is to draw yourself in, not meet with investors, not have the important dialogue, both because I think investors need help in understanding what a management team does know, but also because the management teams need to know what investors are afraid of, what they are curious about. Many times management teams think it's very, very obvious that XYZ is happening because we talked about it in our last earnings call, or we discussed this extensively at our investor day. And yet that doesn't always get through to every single investor. And you can experience that when the investors come in, and if a CEO gets asked the same question over and over again, that can be very informative in helping drive the messaging back to the investment community as a whole, because then you can realize, I know we've said it, we said it this time, we said it publicly this time, we said it publicly this time, but people still don't seem to understand it. So we need to do a better job of expressing that. So my advice would be, when a CEO says, I'm not going to meet with investors, I don't even know what's going on, I think it's an IRO's responsibility to first of all appreciate that, because that's a very tough situation for a CEO to be in.
Yep.
But to find ways to help bridge, again, to let the CEO know that he or she needs to get out there and still be honest with people, because that builds credibility for that day 6 weeks or 6 months or 6 years from now, when we do have more certainty. It helps build that credibility so that people are more likely to appreciate the risks around your business. So, I know it's tough. I've been in those meetings where literally people are getting up and walking out of the room because they're so upset that we don't have better answers than we do. But I would submit to you, even that dynamic is better than looking at the telephone, shutting it off, and saying, I'm going to go into a permanent quiet period. I'm not going to talk about things because I don't know the answers as to what's going on.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. And, I've had a lot of IR professionals in the last 6 months talking about how, by taking that approach, by being more transparent, more communicative, taking the meetings, it also communicates something about the character of your management team and who they are. And I think to the point you were just making, that can put some significant goodwill in the bank for further down the line, because that's a significant part of building trust and credibility with the investment community. Cole, I sense we could carry on just chatting about this for much longer. I really appreciate you joining us for as long as you have. Thanks so much for sharing your insights today, and be well.